They might talk about humor, music, film, books, football and box sets, exercise and maybe even food. Trivia and sport, politics and health, sometimes well-being too. On the Life with Brian. On the Life with Brian.
Coming up on Life with Brian. Sincere apologies in advance, Joe, for the juvenile behaviour that is to come.
I used to be able to enjoy what I would call a pensioner's afternoon, and also the nap has become very important. Women never want to shag someone after a magic trick, so stop it.
Well, it worked on Debbie McGee.
Yeah, apart from her, that gave them all hope, didn't it?
Hello, boys and girls. You've stumbled upon episode 47 of Life with Brian, hosted not only by myself, Mark Godfrey, and my co-host Matthew Christ, but by an actual Brian McClare, a footballer of some note in his time, and perhaps better known these days for being unrecognisable because he's got a big beard. And of course, he's also an inspiration to Gary Neville for his choice of the Stone Roses as Manchester United's walk-on music. How are you both?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. It's good to see you, Brian. I haven't seen you in the papers or on Twitter for at least 2 weeks, upsetting people.
There might have been a few things on Twitter, but I think I was on social media at the weekend, wasn't I? Just because I was at a football. Well, I wouldn't say it was a football match. I was at Old Trafford.
Yeah. But this isn't a football podcast, is it, Mark?
It tends not to be. And we've got a special guest as usual. And on this episode, we have a stand-up comedian and writer who's appeared on all the big panel shows on telly, like Have I Got News For You and Mock the Week, written for Graham Norton. She's had her own show on Radio 4 and is currently in the midst of a nationwide stand-up tour. It's my pleasure to welcome Jo Caulfield to the show. How are you, Jo?
I'm good. I'm great because I am at home. So, because I'm touring, funnily enough, I thought, God, there's lots of things I would like to ask Brian about how you, when you're playing, how you focus your day before a game. That's the thing of, is it a wasted day? Because that's how I feel at the moment on the tour. It's quite hard in terms of, I feel the day is all about the show. Like if you're doing an evening match, the day must be all about the match.
The actual day of the match when you're travelling, like an away game.
Yeah.
The away game, would be, it was always the same, based around the same kind of thing, you know. I mean, we had it's peculiar in terms of now, but when we travelled, we had roommates. So there was two of us would be in the room usually the Friday night before the game, you know. So you had to, I suppose the art of the manager decided who was going to room together, you know, him trying to work out, you know, because we weren't all friends. We respected each other and things like that. We weren't all matey, you know, and they had all their own. They had very similar tastes. I had completely different tastes and views, you know. So I suppose finding somebody that would be willing to room with me was a big challenge for him, you know.
Draw the short straw, I think, is the expression you're looking
So
at.
earlier on,
But
I think it was. So.
I mean, the idea, I'm a very easily irritated person. So the idea of, who would you share a room with? Are you allowed to say, I don't want to share with that person?
Yeah, well, there's certain instances that have happened with where it would have been in certain situations that it was untenable, you know. I know that because of, I mean, my worst ever roommate, and it was a one-off scenario, and I think maybe said this is never again, was the goalkeeper Les Seeley. Now, you get to know in this sort of very intimate, small space someone's habits you don't see during the day, you know, you don't live with them, you know. For example, you train with them, you play with them, you're in dressing room, but you don't see these particular things. So what I see is this guy who wants to, he's not really watching the telly, but he wants the noise of the television on constantly. He smoked, I didn't know he smoked, and he smokes in the room with the window open, and he's just a noisy bastard, right? And I'm like, and he wouldn't, it was so, my view was there would be a balance, you know, maybe one day you'd be able to watch a programme you might want to watch, but there was a kind of an agreement you'd switch the telly off roughly around about the same time, or you knew your roommate would go to sleep and you could watch a wee bit. This is before you could have Bluetooth headphones and all other stuff. But Les, that was a terrible experience for me, and I think I did say, look, I'll pay for my own room. The room with him again. And not long after that stopped playing, I know that they started having rooms of their own, which for me would have been an awful lot better.
And all your teammates, I imagine, as well.
Yeah, well, sometimes it would have been, yeah. But then, like Brian Robson would always say that he loved rooming with me because I was very amenable. I'd make the tea, and he would be quite happy to go to sleep early when I was watching The Word or whatever else was on late on a Friday night, things that he couldn't comprehend at all. And or even comedy that would be on late on Friday nights. And also I had this great ability of when I got up in the morning, I didn't make a noise. I could get dressed and leave the room and be away and not wake him up. And he thought that was the best thing.
Oh, you sound ideal, because I think there's so many people who would be terrible to share a room. And some people are just, even if they're trying, they suck energy out of you. Don't they?
Yeah, two of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes. And then later on when we started getting and I don't know whether I've never asked them. Maybe it's something I should ask them. They're doing questions to ask them. But that when later on I got all the players who didn't speak English, so I got Andrei Kanchelskis as a roommate. So I don't know whether he thought that I would just cope with it and just get on with it, or he was doing it deliberately to see what because I used to try and take the piss out of him as often as I could, Yeah. So that might have been a way of him getting me back. So I had Andrei Kanchelskis, I had Raymond van der Gorges, who actually spoke better English than me anyway, the Dutch goalkeeper. I had Karl Popovsky. One point, just randomly, I had a Chilean trialist, and I'd had Spanish at school. And I can still remember wee bits and pieces of Spanish, and me trying to talk to this guy and him just looking at me thinking, who is this weird person?
Making noises.
Making strange noises that sound a wee bit like Spanish, So,
So does all
of that.
Does this all
but with regards to the game, the game was a bit of a waste in the sense of midweek games was probably more if you travelled away because you've got all day to.
Yeah.
You'd got up, you'd have different people would do different things. You'd go for a walk, you'd have lunch. But the best part for me, being a professional football player, was the afternoon sleep.
I do an afternoon nap,
Afternoon. This is proper in bed, get the curtains shut, proper right out for. That was the best part of that. But yeah, dead time, yeah.
So does all this make you glad that you're touring alone?
Well, it's just maybe I've lost I used to be able to enjoy what I would call a pensioner's afternoon, where whatever town I'd sort of potter about, see what mad museum they've got, and get a feel of a place. But at the moment, I don't seem to have time. And also, the nap has become very important. But I wonder sometimes if the nap is just shutting myself down. Just going, that's all I can cope with and then when I do the show, then I've got the energy and everything. Yeah.
That was very much interesting what you're saying there, Joe, because I found doing nothing tiring, right? Mm-hmm. So that bit about where you're thinking about the game and thinking about what your potential is going to happen and all that kind of thing was tiring. So that the shutting down again is the same thing. So when you woke up, you were completely free of everything again, and then you started from that moment to build towards the game, which sounds like very similar to what you're doing with your
and it's a funny
show.
Thing that because I was thinking about it a lot lately, thinking because I don't want to lose the day, but I think maybe it's just part of the thing, and people would think it's odd, but I think it's a sort of a psychological saving energy thing that you do sort of shut yourself down. And funny enough, lots of comics before a game, and I remember hearing. So his name's gone out of my head. A Scottish player used to do Match of the Day. I think is very fanciable.
Alan Hansen.
I used to, when I was younger,
Lovely Alan.
Lovely Alan. And him saying about being really nervous before, and then of course hitting the pitch and not nervous at all. And I think lots of comics are like that. You're nervous before, and it's a sort of, the stress of that is tiring, and you just want to get on it. And people will, and I've seen comics do it, you do close off a bit and you start to focus on it. And that's when, especially if you're gigging with other comics, if they bring friends in the dressing room and they'll go, oh, come backstage at the Comedy Store. And they walk in thinking this must be the most fun room in the world. This is backstage at the Comedy Store with comedians. This is like Fun Central. And of course it's not. It's just lots of comics like looking at their pads, thinking about what they're going to do, sort of getting in the mood, occasionally telling some story about how they had a terrible gig, but it's not uplifting in that way at all. Like, and for civilians coming in, they're like, oh my God, comedians are really dreary people.
I'm just thinking, we had Mark Steele on the show a while back, and his gig is very much about the town that he's in. That's very much a feature of his show. Do you go to a town and think, I've got to get a bit of material about this town just to make it a bit more relevant?
Well, I've been doing it so long that I've already been to most towns. So I more often go back and go, oh, do they still have that weird market, or do they do this? Or where I was, Evesham the other night, where they have the most amazing signs in the park for toilets. When you go, oh, someone at the council's got a sense of humour, because they have a sign and you think it's just a toilet sign, and then it says decision time, toilets 75 yards or 750 yards. So I thought, oh, that's really nice. And then it had another sign saying award-winning toilets, regular toilets. So it's like you've got to make toilet decisions. So there's can be little things. And then other things, where did I go recently? Oh, Dumfries, where I was going to park, have my little walk around the town, never been there before, and you had to get a parking disc. It said you need a parking disc. So I went into a shop and said, oh, can I buy a parking disc? And they went, oh, we don't have any. So I said, well, where would I get them? She went, oh, go to Smith's. So I went to Smith's, and then they said, oh, we don't have any. You'll get them from the police station. So then I went to the police station, and the police station, of course, is shut, as police stations are now. And then and then I said to someone in the street, I said, do you need a parking disc? And they went, oh yeah, you have to have a parking disc. And then somebody else joined in the conversation and said, oh, but there aren't any traffic wardens. And I thought, well, what does that mean? Because then we're just like going, well, I'm just going to get in my car and drive out, because clearly you can't park in this town anyway. And then under the mid-steeple in the marketplace, this old building, like sort of half Kirk thing, there was a little man. It's almost like a fairy story, because afterwards I thought, was he real? A little old man in a doorway, and I opened the door and he had a shop just selling dog baskets, but it was tiny. A bit like, oh, this isn't really a shop, is it? I think your wife's just gone, why don't you get out the house, pretend you sell dog baskets? And I said to him, have you got any of those parking discs? And he went in this bag and he went, yes. And I went, how much is it? He went, oh, they're free. I've got loads. And so I got it. And then when I got to the gig, everyone went, oh, but there's no parking. There's no traffic wardens, and the discs are free. And you go, well, what is the point? What is the point of this insane system you've got? So I can get obsessed by something like that, where the people in the town are used to it. And then if you point it out to them, they're like, oh my God, why are we all doing this thing? And what is the mystery? They said they haven't had traffic warden since 1987. So you go, what is that about?
So suddenly that all changes in Evesham now. They're going to blame you, aren't they?
Yeah, they're going, hey, let's rebel. We don't need these parking discs. Yeah.
Brian, I rudely jumped in. You usually lead off this conversation. So
No. Joe led off the conversation. It's fantastic. It's easy. Like, for people want to ask me questions, it's a hell of a lot easier than me asking them questions. It saved me the whole day yesterday doing all that research I was doing. So,
now's your chance.
It's just that. Are you still living in the colonies, or a colony in Leith?
I live in Leith. Yes. Now, you say colony.
Are you still living in one of those houses then?
Yeah, well, but what I've learned is there is a sort of small, it's not a snob value, it's there's where we are, there's colonies of that are a certain type workers' house, then we are in what is called villas, but they're still that strange design where they look like row of houses, but then you realise there's too many front doors.
Yeah.
And so we're up. but they're slightly different to a colony because you get your own garden front and back. And then there's above them is the regular actual houses that have the up and down. So we're in an up, but you get a garden front and back, whereas colonies, one has the front, one has the back. But I really like them because they're sort of built at a time when people went, oh, it would be nice if the people who work for us have somewhere decent to live, which people don't really think about now.
Yeah, and what part of that then was, did you fall in love with gardens and gardening before you moved there and before lockdown, or did that happen as a result of lockdown? And the other part of that is there still no fence that's smaller than 6 foot high fences?
Oh, yes. Now, I never had a garden when I lived in London, never ever had a garden. And then when we moved to Edinburgh about 12 years ago on a whim, and loved it, but we lived over Morningside in one of the tenements. So it was a shared garden. But nobody did anything with this massive shared garden. So I started to do the garden, and it was really overgrown, and I started to do it, and then sort of took one area, then another area, then another area. And I remember bumping into somebody in the stair once and talking to them, and they said, and they introduced me to their mum and said, oh, this is and then missed out a word, stopped herself and went, this is the lady that does the garden. And I thought, oh, I think crazy or mad was the word. And I thought, they're all watching me doing the garden going, it's not her garden. She thinks it's her garden, but if she wants to do it, let her do it. So then when we moved over here, then I got that Morningside was not the area for me or my husband. Like, having been in London, I'm just like, this is all too nice for me. And then we started to go out in Leith to bars, and I was like, this is the sort of area I like. I like things happening at a bus stop. I like watching people, seeing what's happening. So then we got this place, and I have my own little garden, and they're built. And this is what you said, when you see my neighbour who had lived here 60 years, she showed me the pictures, how it used to be. And they had these 2-foot fences when they were built, Victorian. So she said her kids, every kid, they played in all of the gardens. Everybody just ran from garden to garden. And it is funny to think now what people have done. It's a very modern thing of everyone puts up 5-6 foot fence, except where we are, there's 5 of us in a row that didn't put up fences. And what it means is you get much more light, and also it's sociable, but everyone also gives each other the space, but you can talk to each other, and it feels like you've got more garden. So when lovely Celia left and somebody bought her place, we were all like, oh God, are they going to put up a fence? And then I thought, I'll do what Celia did when I moved in. And she said in the nicest way, she went, oh, you can put up a fence if you'd like, but you'll get less light. And I'd never thought about it and went, well, I'll just see what she means. And then I didn't. So we said the same thing. And then nobody has put up a fence. We've had 2 lots of new people, and they've all stayed with it. Apart from, they've left now, people at the back. I used to talk to this lady a lot, and her husband was away at sea. And then he came back, and I was still talking to the wife over the tiny fence. And then I went away working for the weekend, and my husband came back and he went, oh, you're going to talk to so-and-so at the back, have a go. And I went out, and they'd put up a 7-foot fence. And I was like, oh, they really don't want to talk to me. But it's not, I like it. I really like it. And I'd always liked the garden. And then lockdown, I was always doing the garden. And then lockdown, it just meant that we could be social. And also there was people, it's a mixed area. I've got people next door with a young kid. And so I played with her a lot. And then on the other side, elderly lady who's on her own. So we would chat. So that was sometimes, you know, or she might have to talk to in the day. So it was a really great service during the lockdown that people wanted to have a chat with people. Or if you were a little kid, you wanted to get some sort of escape and talk to the lady next door, me, and play games, which I found very interesting. I found very interesting child's games, little girls' games, because they haven't changed in that it was still, she wanted to be the princess. Yeah. I never got to be the princess. I noticed that. And also that children cheat in games. I was quite surprised. I was like, when I would say to her, you've cheated, she knew that I knew she'd cheated, but she also knew that she could just front it out and I wouldn't actually say, you know. It's a great area, Leith. I really do. I really like it.
But because one of the things that's relevant to what you were talking about Morningside there was, I lived in Edinburgh during lockdown, and I had the garden flat, right, which was the same kind of thing. It used to be the drying green, and then somebody decided to turn it into a lawn, which is just really a bit of, you could just barely grow grass on it, and there was some plants around the side of it, but it's shared by, what I meant to say, flats. So it was like a lot of flats, right, which it becomes quite clear to you that the number of people, because of lockdown, have not really got anywhere to go. And and because of where we were, there was a big wall at the back, so nobody could see in. So there was lots of rule breaking going on with my neighbours, having drinks, things, and
little socials outside.
Like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
Right. And you'd have all sorts of things. And then you'd have these things can happen right through the day. So it started at 9 o'clock and sometimes go on to 11 o'clock at night. And I never used to go out because people could see it in my thing. I had to keep my blinds shut all the time, I used to sometimes go upstairs and have a look, see who was there. Yeah. It used to frustrate and drive me mad. But we had this one guy would do the garden and he would come out and almost be crying because people would be dragging stuff across the bit he cut.
Yeah.
Put chairs in it, so there'd be holes of chairs and different things. And they'd be, oh, look what they've done here and no respect. And cigarette butts and all that lying all empty. And why can't people just clear up and all that? And every morning was an adventure about who had done what. And he did all the kind of things about the garden, and he planted nearly everything in it. And some of the things were to fit people's tastes and other tastes. But one of the guys at the other side was an artist, and he always wanted colour in the garden. He kept demanding, he wouldn't put his own plants in, but he kept demanding of this other lad, I want some colour,
Yeah.
And then I had the wonderful image of this lad coming into the garden the first thing in the morning, cutting flowers for his little vase that he wanted to take into the house to maybe give him some inspiration that day. But whatever canvas he was working on with the shortest of dressing gowns on that barely covered.
Oh, no.
No underpants, And it's like, oh, for fuck's sake, this is what I've got to look at first thing in the morning,
Oh, no.
So during that period, as much as it was great to have that kind of thing, that I longed to have a garden of my own was the thing about, well, no matter, I don't care what the house looks like, but it's a garden that people are not allowed to be in. It was entertaining a lot of the time.
And hang their underpants in as well.
Yeah. That's too much. That's too much, people, isn't it?
Is that very much an Edinburgh? Is that very much an Edinburgh trait then? Because I want to see Brian.
What, they don't wear underpants?
Yeah, that's right. But do you find, being a Glaswegian-ish, Brian, does it have its traits that you think, well, that's just such an Edinburgh thing that isn't the case elsewhere?
Well, I mean, I think that Joe will probably point out there's a few things you just said, but where Morningside was the posh area in the south of. I lived in the edge of the posh area of the north of. And Leith is very similar to Salford and Manchester. They don't say they're from Manchester. They don't say they're from Edinburgh. If people ask you, where do you live? Where are you from? You say, I'm a Leither. I'm from Leith. And they talk about crossing the border to Edinburgh. But there is no real kind of... People will know if you live there long enough
people know
where Leith starts and where Edinburgh starts.
The Boundary Bar that is being renamed the Boundary Bar again, which is on Leith Walk, and they used to have different licensing laws then. So you just step from one, just the street halves, and then because there was more factories or whatever down in Leith, they had different licensing. There's still some pubs there that are open at like 5 a.m, supposedly for dock workers. But
dock workers.
They don't look like they've got jobs, the people there. That's all I'm saying. Yeah.
Previously on Life with Brian.
If I were to suggest that Steve Clarke might just be thinking about calling Brian McClare into the Scotland squad, at that point McCoist would say, well, not for me, Clive.
when I was listening to Manchester United and Status Quo's "Come On You Reds" on tape, I would never have dreamed that one day that I would be on a Zoom call with one of the backing singers of that amazing track.
Used to fight like mad on the terraces. Everybody used to have a scrap on the terrace, and nobody bothered. They let you get on with it.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Joe, I think most of our listeners will probably know that you are into football, but I'm not sure many people will know who your team is. I know, having listened to another podcast, like me, you were an RAF child.
Oh,
so
you?
So I can imagine you grew up around people with a wide variety of allegiances, but you came to football a lot later than that, didn't you?
Italia 90 was me coming to football. It had sort of been around because my uncle, one of my mum's brothers, played for Northern Ireland. He was goalkeeper for Northern Ireland. Played quite a few games, but didn't go professional because at the same time he was goalkeeper, a new goalkeeper arrived called Pat Jennings. And my Pat Jennings,
oh,
yes. And my uncle Eddie went, I think he's a lot better. He said he was just miles above him. And that's when he went, oh, maybe I'll stay with teaching and not become a professional. So it was sort of in the back of my mind. And my mum always loved George Best and felt very sorry for him always. And being away from home, she used to think that was a terrible thing for him. And but my dad never was into football, or my brother or anything. But it was then, because I was working in a kitchen and a restaurant, and a lot of the staff were African, and some were from Sierra Leone, and some were from the Cameroon, and them getting really excited how well they were doing, and we all started watching it. And then I sort of got into it, and I also started reading. It's a funny way to get into it. I got into lots of like social history books about football and what football clubs mean to different towns. And then when you're traveling around, I still love stadiums. And I remember going to Main Road when it was at Main Road, and I love any stadiums. And Edinburgh has two that are still in where the houses are. And to me, it's very romantic. Seeing people, families, dads and sons walking with their scarves. You know, when Hibs are playing, you see that everybody coming from miles, and you see the same thing with Hearts. And I like that element of football as well. So people always immediately ask, what's your team? And I don't have a team. I have favourites. And I suppose I'm not from anywhere. And also, to me, if the team changes and the manager changes and even your stadium changes, if I'm not from a town, what am I supporting? So sometimes I'll go, oh, Wolves, a few years ago, Wolves are suddenly exciting to watch. I like Wolves. They're now on my team that I like. There are some teams that I can never like, Brighton and Hove, because I feel Brighton doesn't need a football team in the Premier League, as some other towns do. Blackburn needs a team in the Premier League. No, things like that is how I justify stuff. When Hull briefly was up, I thought that was really exciting that they were up. And a lot of people in Hull, it's mostly a rugby town. So I think a lot of them weren't even aware they had a football team. So it's sort of support it, I suppose, in a different way. And even then when it comes to what country do you support, that's very difficult as well, because I was born in Wales, parents are Northern Irish, grandparents Southern Irish, live in Scotland, grew up in England. So I actually support England last in my list.
Well, that's something you both have got in common then, isn't it, Brian? Although yours is last on this, but England isn't even on Brian's list.
So would you suggest then, Joe, that the criteria for membership, because that's what everybody talks about, the membership of the Premier League, and I think it, in a way as well, which would satisfy sort of things you're saying, the criteria should involve the size of the ground with regards to how many people you can get into it. So that would obviously discount or kick out Luton and kick out
Oh,
Brighton
no.
and kick out Bournemouth.
Oh, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't kick out Luton. I'm very excited by
Because
Luton.
Luton's in the housing estate, is that why?
Yeah, I think there's a
Yeah.
definite criteria here, isn't there? The stadium needs to be in a housing estate, and
The housing estate's one. If it's in a housing estate, it's all right. So if it's one of these stadium that'll be newly built in the
Like
outskirts,
Bolton,
it might
that's
not
a
even be anywhere
terrible
close
stadium.
to.
Yeah.
Which one?
Bolton,
Well,
where
it's not
that
in
is.
Bolton. It's not in
Exactly. It's horrible. Yeah. So that's got no feel to it at all.
Well, no, I don't. Well, do you think any of the new stadiums have got a real atmosphere to them? I'm not quite sure.
It depends how new, I suppose, you mean. Because then, I think Old Trafford's new, but apparently it's very old. When they're going, this, just terrible old stadium. Of course, we can't win games. That's
very
in the
topical.
story at the moment. Yeah.
Do you ever go down the route of, soon as you've alienated any listeners that we might have in Brighton and Bolton, do you ever go down the road of putting football-related material in your gigs, or do you steer well clear of that? Again, we've had people...
I was told a really good joke the other day. Well, I saw a really, really good joke about the old film. Brilliant it was.
Oh, for me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think that is my joke. That's my joke I have.
Brilliant. I did that.
I do have an
I
old
retold it,
joke.
and I got a really good
Yeah.
reaction to the person I retold it to as well. So.
Oh, that's good. And it's one I'll do, because you'll often be gig in Glasgow when there's an Old Firm game about to happen. And I think especially like with my voice, if I start that joke, I can feel the tension in the room. Like, what is she talking about? You shouldn't go here. You're going to mess this up. This is going to be terrible. And then the relief that it is a good joke, and it does work. And I like that tension of them going, oh God, what are you doing? Don't say this. And then, yeah. Works.
Yeah, because if that's the only football joke you've got, to do that, to use the Old Firm is pretty much a minefield, isn't it?
Well, I wouldn't do other, often, I'll do jokes about, like I do joke, it's not a joke about football, it's more about my husband wearing the shirt, like he'll wear an Aberdeen shirt when we're watching them at home, as though, I'm like, nobody's going to call you up. Like, I don't understand why I'm not dressed, and call the midwives on. I'm not wearing a nun's habit. I don't understand dressing for television. So it's more about those sort of things to do with football, and also men in the pub doing football facts, and how pompous sometimes men can be about players, with their criticism of players, going on about one of his mates, I'm whispering, one of his mates going on about Kevin De Bruyne being too old. And although he seems to be, it's all right, but, he's not going to last long now because he's 32. And I was thinking, yeah, and you're 62, so shut up. So I might talk about that thing. But the other thing about, if you mention a team, like especially Liverpool, Manchester, if you City or United, or if you Everton or Liverpool, then the other side has to make a noise. And it's just annoying that you couldn't mention Everton without people cheering or booing or, so it's often, it just gets in the way of what you're doing. And I've had this conversation, Justin Morehouse, comedian, and he says the same, he goes, oh, you try and avoid it because it's just, they can't help themselves. And it sort of often gets in the way. And also, not everyone's into football. So I think if you're doing a football dinner, which I don't do really, I've done a couple, but I don't really like it, because I found that when you're booked for these things, if you're really knowledgeable about football and have lots of good football jokes, that's okay. I'm not knowledgeable enough. And I did one, and it was lots of small businessmen who sponsored these teams. It wasn't like a high up league, and their wives, and the businessmen wanted me to entertain their wives who hates these dinners, but they were also giving out awards to lots of young footballers who I know are going, well, I'm not of interest to them, So it was like, I can't please everybody at this dinner. And what I often do is take the piss out of businesses. But these businesses, they didn't like that, because they're like, no, we've sponsored a team because we have a huge ego. So we would like you to compliment us. So funny enough, the last one was Isthmian League, and I'm not doing any more football or sports dinners. I thought, no. not for me. And also, especially rugby. Rugby, you do get a certain type of bloke this bloke, just before I was about to be introduced, and he said, "Oh, I've got a story to tell you." I was like, "Oh, I'm just about to be introduced." He went, "Yeah, but you're the entertainment." I went, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, you could use my story." I mean, how arrogant is that? Just before I go on to go, "Oh, well, here's the material for you."
Did you hear it out? Was it any good?
Yeah. No, I didn't. I didn't listen to him. And then he looked a bit annoyed that I'd been funny and that people had liked me. So
yeah, we all know people like that.
Yeah.
Who do you think would make a better ensemble for a day out in the pub? A bunch of old footballers or a group of comics?
Oh, it's fun. I'm always interested in anybody who's done something, at whatever level. Being committed to something, I think, is very interesting. So I think sometimes also, I think footballers and comics both have a lot of dead time. So you can use it how you like, but certain footballers who I read about and have listened to our podcasts and stuff, they use it to read, and so do comics. So we're people who know lots of odd things just because we've got a lot of time, and you can sort of learn about stuff and be interested in things. So yeah, I think, and also like comics, there's some terrible comics that I'd never want to hang around with. The sort of comics that do their material at you, and all comics hate that, go, "Oh God, stop, they're doing their material." Like magicians who want to do tricks, to go, that will never make you friends, or women never want to shag someone after a magic trick, so stop it.
Well, it worked on Debbie McGee.
Yeah, apart from her, that gave them all hope, didn't it? Spawned a whole new generation of magicians.
I'll need to stop taking my football to the pub and playing keepy up here or something, like you came up there. Attention to me,
It's
I'm
funny.
not getting much conversation at all,
It's funny because we were talking about Edinburgh just then. I always have this. I mean, I love Edinburgh. I've been loads of times, but I always have this vision of, like, because it's such a place that creatives are attracted to, that everybody there is either a wannabe comedian or an act, or it must just be oozing annoying people in a certain way. If you live there, if you know
no
what I mean.
Offense taken.
But it must every corner you go around, there must be somebody there that's
in the
kind of budding.
festival. Yeah, in the festival is, it's awful to say. I suppose as I get older, I don't mind. It used to drive me crazy seeing young drama students putting on terrible versions of great plays and charging people, because you go, this is going to be terrible. Your version of Uncle Vanya, where everyone's 18. But now I kind of go, oh, well, let them be. It's no harm. I'm not going to go, am I? And there's all sorts on, but it's with everything with me, it's people who take themselves very seriously are really tedious to be around. Whether they're actors or comics or writers who talk about their work in that way, where you go, I mean, I did have it recently with a comedian who's doing very well. And he was telling me about how if he's done a special, he then doesn't do that material in clubs. And I just said to him, I don't know who you're telling, because I'm not interested. He was acting like I was a member of the audience who would just hang on every word. This to me isn't a conversation. I don't know what you're doing.
I don't know how you lived there so long, Joe. You don't suffer fools at all.
Part of that thing is great, because you just mentioned there, they're talking about time, aren't you? So time can be starts to get precious, and about what you want to do with that time, whether it's you want to wander around doing what you want to do, you want to do your garden, you want to have a nap before your gig, you want to still want to perform because clearly you really enjoy it, you love it. It also it may well be healthy for all sorts of other reasons because you're away and different things. But when you're involved in situations, you want to be involved in situations, like I've seen you saying, being with your friends and doing normal things with your friends, and hopefully they'll talk to you about normal things. And normal things in normal people's lives can be hilarious, right? And maybe and I was wondering whether your friends or your relations or your husband dread sometimes you're going to go on tour again with a new thinking, what's she going to say, and what's she going to say about Did they not? Did they know what you're going to say, or do you just say, no, I'll just use it, and I'll just expect that I'll get away with it, and they won't be offended by it, or?
I think when my husband's family is from Aberdeen, and when I play there, because I suppose until I'd met him, I had not met people with the hardness of people in Aberdeen, because it's a tough place, like the older generation. And his mum, I do stuff on his mum, and I absolutely adore his mum. She's 94, still in her own home. Has only just recently said, maybe I should have moved to a flat because I'm bored going up and down the stairs. Not that they were too much, she was bored of them. And she stopped driving at 92 when she crashed her car and said, well, maybe I won't drive now. But it's just, so certain things, and it's not meanness, there's obviously a stereotype about people in Aberdeen being mean, but it's carefulness with money, and also carefulness about life, like about being hard on your kids because you've got to prepare them for life because life is hard. So certain things that I would tell stories about her, but she knows that, and my nephews and nieces, they sort of egg it on, go anything she does like that. If we're in a restaurant, and she always wants to take everything away with her, just anything that can be wrapped up. I'm like, no, you can't take the napkins, Or when we took her to Waitrose in Edinburgh, his mum walked around like it was a museum. She loved it so much. And in Waitrose, they have recipe cards and that. Oh my God, she was loving it. She was taking it. And these are free. You can take anything that's free, and samples of food. And she would just take everything that's free. So talk that. And when we're having a first Christmas there, and they were giving me a present, and I thought the way to show you were pleased to get a present was to rip open all the wrapping, and everyone went quiet, and they said, oh, and they just went, Mum normally saves that to reuse. And I was like, oh my God, they were like, his mum did look absolutely disgusted with me, because she would literally iron it, put it away for next year. So that sort of carefulness I like, and it's a much older generation. And then I thought, no, my parents were sort of that generation as well, where they're, because they don't expect a lot out of life, and so it's different. But I talk about my husband, but he's also a mixture of other people's husbands.
Yeah.
If friends tell me, I go, oh, I'm going to take that thing that your husband does and say that my husband does it. But it's always done affectionately. I think of couples who come to my show. Well, someone said to me, it's only when you've been in a relationship for a long, long time do you realize how close love and hate are, in terms of, I do it affectionately, but oh my God, sometimes you go, yeah, I could murder you. But it's a release, I think, for couples. I don't think men ever think I'm unfair to them. I think more often they're like, how do you know that about us? How do you, that we do this when we go out, or do that, like ridiculous conversations men have about, who would win in a fight. And you go, oh my God, what are you, 9 years old? This is so crazy. So I wouldn't say anything that actually upset anybody I knew. But I like you said, and people, I have friends with normal jobs is a very good thing to have, because then, you're in touch with things and stuff that happens and stories, and you can soak it all up.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you a question. That's one of the things about it. It's a fact that came out of your book that not this so much about the actual story about you jumped out of a lorry in the Alps.
Oh, yeah.
That's the thing I read, right? And I believe you were 16 then. I think Annie would have been 19 or 20, or was that be about?
Yeah.
The thing for me that sticks me about that, where you really know about your background, your parents are from Northern Ireland and all the different things in Europe, you were at boarding school. How do you get permission? How do you get a passport? How does this all happen that you end up being, I assume, at school one day, and the next day you're attempting to get out of England to Europe?
Yeah, I don't know. With hindsight, my parents seem very lackadaisical when I think about things I was allowed to do. But it was always because Annie was there, and who was 4 years older than me, it was always seen as well, she's sensible. And she so wasn't sensible at all, you know. So I was 16, and Annie said we could do this where you get a train, but we only had one train ticket, and then we had to get off and hitchhike. And it was also at the time, remember you used to get a year passport, wasn't a proper passport?
Yeah.
Or was it just for Europe or something?
A little brown one, yeah.
Yeah, and it was easy to get.
Yeah. Get in the day, yeah.
That's it. So I got one of those passports and just went off with my sister with a rucksack and hitchhiked in Europe. And I thought, I don't think this is a very good idea. Because I also used to hitchhike where we lived, because it was in a village, so you couldn't get anywhere because there wasn't a bus or anything. So I did hitchhike. And now I think, well, that was a bit, shouldn't have done that either. But in Europe, I mean, it was constant, especially lorry drivers. They just seemed to, like, we had been put there for their pleasure, you know. So we would get in their vans, and then my sister would go, oh no, it started again. You know, a hand would reach across, and then she would go, right, you've got to let us out. But this one, she thought it was more dangerous. And that was when we were literally, it was a hairpin bend in the Swiss Alps. And she said to me because it was very scary. The lorries virtually stop when they do the corner. She said, when it gets to the corner, grab your stuff. We're getting out. And we leapt out of this barely moving lorry. And then it was also that way because we were standing. And then the fact that he's then got to accelerate, but so slowly that we're there and going, oh God, he can stop, he can get out. Because you think of it like he would just like, and then the lorry's gone and you're safe and it's fine. But it was about 10 minutes for him to get out of sight from us, you know. So I don't know how I was allowed to do these things. And I was also, I think I didn't really ask either. And then after, like, I did sixth form, I didn't do very well in my A-levels, and I just really had it with school. And so I just went to London because Annie was living there, and I got a job as a breakfast waitress. So you got accommodation. And I just thought, well, that's it. You know, I finished school, I should leave home. In a way, I felt like my parents had done their bit. So you leave home. And there wasn't a discussion about it either, like what you're going to do with your life. I just was like, weird. I had no plan about anything.
So how long were you away from then you went to Europe? And you said, did you say, by the way, we're just away to, what did you say? We're away to
I don't
Europe,
know. I've no idea. Because then I didn't go home. We went back to London, and that's when I got a job. And I remember because the A-level results came out, and my dad said, well, you haven't done that well. But I was a year young for my class because I was September birthday. So I was 17. And my dad said, so you can come back and you can retake your A-levels. And I just went, I don't think I'll do that. And that's when I went and got a job. And as far as I was concerned, I had a job. I had accommodation because there was a hostel that you got a job for. So I was like, well, I'm sorted. That's life, isn't it? All you need is a job and accommodation. I've done it. You know, I'm set for life.
Do you think that stood you in good stead then for the sort of comedy route that you took? That life experience?
Who can say? Because, you know, there are very clever, wise people who do comedy, who trained as doctors and things and then started doing comedy. I don't know. I was drifting about. I think it makes me more, you know, that I suppose I'm not what people think I am, because I know, because of the way I talk and sort of boarding school, people get a different idea. But actually, you know, I was like left home at 17 and have worked ever since, and was in bands and I didn't think it was even being wild. It was just, this seems a great life. I loved London. It was cheap to live then. This is 80s, you know, 90s. I'm just really enjoying myself living day to day.
Oh,
and then much later I went, apparently you're meant to have some sort of plan and a career and those sort of things.
So where did the comedy inspiration come from then?
I always liked comedy, and I do remember, you know, I like watching it, and I remember seeing somebody showing it was a video of Richard Pryor and Steve Martin, and I'd seen, like, you know, the comedians telling jokes on telly. That's what I'd grown up with, but this wasn't like that. Like Steve Martin, I went, he's just an idiot. That looks like I could do that. And then I went to a comedy club because I knew, weirdly, because I was a rockabilly at the time, I knew Mark Lamar, the comedian, but I knew him from the rockabilly scene. And then someone said he did comedy, and that seemed like a lot, like just made up. That's insane. How would he be doing comedy? And I went to the comedy store with a friend, and he was on, and Jack D was on, and it was really their attitude. They were both so dismissive of the audience. It was like they didn't want to entertain anyone. It was a completely different attitude. It was like Jack D was, Mark Lamar particularly seemed to despise the audience, and Jack D was just on stage moaning and angry about stuff. And I thought I could do that. That's the person I would like to be. Yeah.
Well, you thought you could be angry about things, or you thought you could be funny.
Well, I was angry about things and grumpy, and I didn't want to do any kind of. I think because I'd been a really bad-tempered waitress. Like if I didn't like customers, I could go either way. If I liked them, I could be very good. I was quite efficient. But if I didn't like customers, oh my God. Like there was one table who went to the manager and said, oh, can we pay you? And they went, oh, you've got to pay your waitress. And we said, oh, do we have to? Because we're frightened of her. So they rubbed me the wrong way. But it was just that it was the way they did comedy seemed real. It wasn't like I've always hated that, you could, burst into a song at any moment because you've got to entertain people. I feel it's more Dave Allen was the one when I was a kid, where it's more, you're on the same level as the audience. And I think that's all very like punk rock. It's we're all the same level. Nobody's entertaining anybody because that feels servile. It's all, we're on the same level.
And you talk about Mark Lamar there. Was it because that you were having a conversation where you knew about him and thought, how can this person be doing comedy? He's not funny. Was that the...
No, I didn't think he wasn't funny. It just was I'd never heard of anybody who did comedy. I didn't know it was a thing that you could do. That's what seemed alien about it. And then someone said, oh, he's been on telly. And I was like, has he? And that was when he was doing, I think it was Jonathan Ross had a show, and he'd been on that. But it seemed like some, just absolutely an alien thing. You might as well have said, oh, he's in the Royal Ballet. Can't be doing that.
So was your route the classic, get up, give it a go?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, completely. I had thought about it, and that I had thought about what is a routine. Like I knew I needed to have some sort of routine. So the thing I did, which I think isn't a bad way to start, any story that I would tell friends if they laughed, if I said something in conversation, and you do have that, don't you? Like if you out in a pub, you go, oh, I've got a funny story, I'll tell my friends. So I thought anything I've got like that, that's what I'll do on stage. So it's already got some laughs somewhere, So then did it. And like most people, your first gig goes really well because you're full of adrenaline and enthusiasm. And also you're not afraid because you don't know that you should be. You're ignorant. So the first one goes well, and and I was hooked immediately. I was like, this is the thing, I think. And I was like 29 then, I was like, I think this is the thing that is going to stop me from drifting around, not knowing what I'm doing. And then you have to learn. I always say it's not like when I learned drums, I could learn to play them, quietly or noisily, but privately. Comedy, you have to learn to do it in front of people. You have to get on stage and ruin someone's evening for 5 minutes by being terrible. There's no other way. You just can't do it except by getting on stage.
You're listening to Life with Brian.
I think there's a real reason behind that. It's not that. But he's made that up because I know he's going to make up about slipping in dog piss. There must be something even worse in reality.
Sorry, you can't punch a polar bear in the face. Well, actually, it's a Brian.
For God's sake.
And I says, you're out there eating biscuits and I'm in here working bollock naked.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Has there ever been a frustrated stand-up comedian in you, Brian? I can honestly, I'm not taking the piss. I can see you having that, over the years, you've done some pretty good, I wouldn't say stand-up, but, you can hold a room. I know that.
The difference between if I decide I'm going to do a talk about football, so if I've written it down, so sometimes I have a theme where I'll weave it together around a team. So I'll pick a team. No, it's not because they're the best players, whatever, but because I think they're funny stories about each person in that particular team to tell a story about, and because the stories have been told before, and I've got a laugh, the same kind as you've said before. I just assume that because you've got a captive audience, that they want to hear stories about that, and then the same kind of thing when people ask me, and it's the same. I've learned as I've gone along how it's like telling a joke, so telling the story as you would tell a joke. So there's the beginning of it as a middle bit, and then maybe a pause and then the punchline, which is something you get. Like just the same thing you learn as you go along because you understand what point people may or might not laugh, and then to move on if they don't laugh at a particular time, knowing that you're there for a particular period of time, and then hopefully some point. For me, it's that, and I'm shitting myself when I'm going to be doing any of this, irrespective of who's there or what it's about, is that, but for somebody laughs right away, then I feel that it's been successful, irrespective of what I'm going to say later on. Now, the thing for me is that they've come to some, not I suppose, maybe, because I'm doing a Q&A next week with Andrew Cole, and the people that are coming there are coming to hear stories about our careers and other players. Now I tell stories a bit like you said about you're talking about. I'll take that bit from someone else's partner or somebody else's mother or whatever, and I use other people's stories. Two parts to that. One, if I think they're funny, I think that they should be retold, because they're going to die out if nobody tells them. Because some of these people that I tell, the stories that I tell about them are no longer able to tell them, or they're no longer alive. With regards to doing what you're doing, I just can't see myself getting up there and going to a complete audience of like when you did it the first time and go. And then I think that even if it was funny, I think I got a laugh. I'd really struggle with the idea. If I didn't, I would just be walking off, I think, so
but you're
I'm not
also,
sure to be able to do that, Maybe if I wrote down something, I don't know, but
you're also being interesting because you have something to say, because you have a story that people are interested in. I think anybody who's been at your level in something and as good as you were at something, people want to know that story. They want to sort of be close to it. And because I think we all think, oh, there's a secret and then I could be that. But they're, so we're always interested in, and also people who are naturally talented, and then people who are naturally talented and work at it.
There's no such thing as natural talent.
Yeah.
It's work, hard work. So, I mean, people like say to me about, oh, it's not fair because of whatever it is. And I says, well, look, did you start to practice when you were 2 years of age?
Yeah.
What? Well, I started kicking a ball about when I was 2 years of age. And for some reason, one of the reasons was there was not a lot of other things to do then. And I just kept doing it, and I enjoyed doing it, and I just kept doing it, and with more practice. Eventually got half decent at it. And then there's lots of other things that happen in between that, which I think fortune is one of those things. However, I don't think people, they say, like for example, they'll say, oh, Jude Bellingham, what is so naturally talented. I think there's genetics involved in that.
Yeah.
I think the physicality that comes into professional sport can be important, if you're and that comes from, your parents. But the actual other part of it's down to practice, for me. And I think that about everything.
Yeah, I do, and I always find it very interesting.
And it's a good way to get involved in an argument, because a lot of other people are convinced it's talent, so...
Yeah, I think it's both, but you can make yourself talented as well by working.
That's what I'm saying. You've worked hard to become that good at that, what you do. So you've done.
But some people
done so many things to become good at
both.
it.
I think, because I do think, particularly with football, because I think, I suppose if you can't play like I can't play, to watch it sometimes you're like, I can't even see how your body would think to do that. And I think sometimes it's very beautiful to watch. And then there's times you go like the muscle, but then they go the muscle memory. If you, like you're saying, the practice, your body just knows and it does things. And I think some players also make me sort of funny. Like you played with Dennis Irwin, who I thought was always funny because he was seemed like just a PE teacher, serious person, like seemed boring, great player, but just like a grown-up surrounded by people who weren't grown-ups. And weirdly, I think Kevin De Bruyne is like that as well. Even when he was young, I remember him first coming here and just being, oh my God, who's that really intelligent, sensible child on the pitch who are just who seem like grown up. And Jude Bellingham has that grown up thing, though he's not boring like Dennis Irwin. I don't mean that in a horrible way, just like you just don't seem to fit with footballers.
So that's people in Brighton, people in Bolton, and now Dennis Irwin that
and I like Dennis Irwin, but it always made me laugh. It always seemed like, somebody's out of the team, and so this bloke's dad's got to play instead, so bring on Dennis Irwin.
You can't picture him playing football today, that's for sure.
I think I love that. But I love that view you have there, Joe, of somebody being objective about things. I think that being objective about any particular thing, particularly people about football that you've just done there and football players, is brilliant because you can, because you're involved with people for a long time, you don't see that kind of thing. But from what you're saying, I can completely get what you're saying about that kind of thing. He's there, he comes out, and he's there.
It's a job of work.
Job, and he does it, and he doesn't interact with anybody else. It's before, after, or whatever else it is. Yeah. I think that's a brilliant way of it. So,
and it's funny, and that's why there's the personality. Yeah.
I won't mention you. I was saying, I've just had a brilliant. And I'd listen. Just maybe because I'm a bit odd anyway. I'd love somebody to say that's what they thought about me, that I was boring and that I was just like a.
Well, we know Graham Sharp
and all that kind of thing.
Didn't Graham Sharp say that about you?
But that was a bit, but I don't mind what people say about me.
I don't think striker can be boring. It's not the same. No. But I'm always interested. I mean, I'm also interested in managers and what, that indefinable quality that makes somebody a good manager or good with people. And then people who just aren't, which is weird, what that is about people or their body language.
I can give you a view on why some people who might have been very good at something before, say, playing, who aren't good as managers.
Yeah.
And the main reason for that is they have an inability to admit that they're wrong.
So a good manager has to be able to admit they're wrong.
Sometimes a good manager will admit they're wrong when they're right.
Yeah.
And do it the other way around because they know that what they're trying to achieve. There's a lot of top players who have recently had a go-at manager.
Yes.
Who have the same
that's very interesting. Yeah.
Who you'll see week in and week out who have the inability to admit they are flawed and they might be wrong about something. If you're going to deal with people on a day-to-day basis, you can't be telling them that I was great and you're shit.
Yeah. But also that they have to realise that I'm sure like brilliant people like Klopp and Pep are learning all the time.
All the time, yeah.
And would never say they know everything.
Yeah. But they're evolving. They evolve.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, and they have.
Well, they're, that people talk about an awful lot more about psychology in sport. I would say that the great managers in anything all through time are wonderful at psychology. But they learned it on the pavement. They learned it as they went along. They learned it by asking other great managers questions about those specific things.
Yeah.
I didn't understand why Alex Ferguson only ever read biographies or autobiographies. Now, I didn't understand that because I wanted to escape from real life. I didn't want to read about other people's terrible lives. I just wanted to read about fiction and fantasy and things like that until I worked out that he was looking for something he could use.
Yeah.
He might learn something that he might use in a day-to-day situation, or he might use something that they'd taken and use it in a team talk. So sometimes you talk about war situations with regards to conflict, how it can apply to a particular game, Most of the people in the room had no idea what he was talking about, but I knew we were talking about, because I used to read the Warlord comic when I was a kid.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's really, really interesting and funny.
That's why he read them, So
yeah. I'm always interested in it can be in music or football managers. I do read biographies for for that, to finding out how people stick at things and, people who've achieved. It's interesting, and they're often stubborn as well.
Oh, yeah, very much so.
I thought that often, like, people who were very good players is because they haven't, maybe completely wrong, they haven't had to think about playing, so they don't understand why other people can't do what they do. They just go,
again, I think there's two parts to that, though. There's the one part of it is they practice for a long, long time. Two things. But practice for a long time, and practice and played with good players.
Right.
So if you're playing, your teams have to be full of good players. If you take a good player out of a good team and put him in a fourth division team, he will be very quickly as poor as, or as good as they are. He'll get to the level that they're at because they cannot get to his level. So he or she will drop to that level, and they'll become that type of player.
That is interesting. That's a bit, in a comedy way, that's a bit like what we call, you'll get like a button-pushing comedian. So what they do is very basic. As a comedian, you've heard it all before. It's not very original, but the audience haven't, because they've just come out to have a laugh. And so a comedian will go, oh, this could be a difficult gig, because everyone on the bill has been very route one. And sometimes it makes it hard to do something that's not that, But similarly, I've seen people then go out and not be route one, and the audience go, oh, good, something else. And, you go, oh, well, I've underestimated the audience. They do want something a bit more.
I read something that you admire Mick Lynch.
Oh, hugely. What a refreshing voice. And I think he's made people look so foolish. And what's so wonderful about him is he's really good at his job. And MPs, particularly now, of all kinds of parties, are not very good at their job. They're not experts at it. But he always says, I'm representing my workers. I've only got here because they voted for me because I'm good at my job. So he has to be good at his job of negotiating for them. So when he talks, he really, really knows what he's talking about. And I feel is sort of, he's that second generation Irish people I grew up with in London, or got trades and hardworking, and is fighting for a life that people's lives used to get better and they don't, because people have thought that workers' rights weren't important. And I think now we're realizing how wrong that was. But I just think he's so good when he's interviewed, because he doesn't lose his temper, and he just corrects people and says, you're completely wrong about that. You don't know what you're talking about. This is what it is. And it's an absolute joy to watch that. And it's sometimes with journalists who allow people to say things that aren't true. I think that happens a lot in the media at the moment. They'll say, well, we've got two sides to this story. But you can't have two sides if it's raining. You can't have the other person going, it's not raining. No, it is raining. You can see it's raining. So he's that voice of reason. And also anytime he's been interviewed, I thought he's funny, self-deprecating. Also talks about, he's a bit of an old punk, he's a bit of an old lefty in terms of when culture changed, which I remember in the 80s, and gay people came out and everything, and like two-tone music and all that, like where everybody suddenly the world was more inclusive. And he's part of that generation. So yeah, I think he's fantastic.
It's funny. Do you think, going back to what we were saying about people being grumpy and funny, and I mean, you basically described Mick Lynch. Do you look at people like him and think you'd make a good comedian?
He would, but I think he would think, what a useless waste of your time. I think I've got much more important things to do than be a comedian. It's like when a lot of people, especially people in the media, kept saying to him, what do you think about being a celebrity? You're on everything. And he was like, well, it's a byproduct of me trying to get a good wage and working conditions for the union. Yeah. He wasn't interested in that.
No, I'm not saying he will, but I'm just thinking his personal traits. I think there's sometimes you.
Oh, absolutely. I would go and listen. Yeah. Listen to him talk. I think would be great. Yeah.
But part of the thing for when he's doing his stuff and part of the entertainment he must have with being involved in these situations, and you said it perfectly there, Joe, is that he's an expert at what he does. Whoever he's speaking to none of them are experts at what they do, really. So I don't think there's many journalists who would be speaking to, or indeed certainly not in the political landscape, people who you'd be looking at going, in normal terms, if you weren't doing what you were doing, I wouldn't be wasting my time talking to you. And one of the things I was reading about him yesterday was talking about, was just saying that his organisation will be supporting Jeremy Corbyn if he decides to stand in the next election. And the reasoning behind that is he's saying that there is a need for change, but Keir Starmer's not getting to have an open field. There has to be other people there of dissenting voices or a different kind of voice. And it got me to kind of thinking, or reflecting a wee bit, going probably all the way back to the beginning of COVID, all the way through to now, is that I think that we live in a dictatorship, not a democracy. And that seems to be evident to me in the last 3 years, 4 years.
Well, because of our weird voting system, the first past the post makes it like that then who's ever in power, and they're also not the most popular. They're sort of the most, the weird way that they can win, but lots of other people will have voted for different people. Like that voting system, if that doesn't change, then, like you say, it does whoever's in power, that's it.
Is that your stance for standing as an MP at the next election, Brian?
God, wow. Would you?
I think you would have done it at the time, wouldn't you?
Asked me, yeah, I would, yeah. Yeah, I would, yeah. But the part of that, you have to tell people exactly what's happening. There's people are telling lies, right? But over the period of time, they're actually believing that these lies might actually be true. So what are they doing it for? If I was doing something like that, I'm not doing it for me.
Yeah.
So I agree with what you're saying with Mick Lynch. She's not doing it for him alone. I've got other people who would argue to the contrary, big for daft little reasons. Well, why is he getting paid so much money? I said, well, the reason, whatever he's getting paid is irrelevant to what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
You know, he's not doing that job because he wants to get paid that amount of money. I don't think any of those type of people are. Whereas when you look at the other side, if you want to be involved in the political realm, for me, it should be about what can you do for the people you represent and be truthful to them. And when you can be truthful to them, you can be truthful whatever it is you're going to be involved in. But part of the thing is that there's a steer towards, or a collective steer of, this is the way that you have to vote for a particular thing. But I think if you have people, that's why in the 90 years saying, when I was at school 40 odd years ago, that I first became aware of proportional representation, which seemed to me as an 11-year-old kid, well, that sounds pretty sensible.
Yeah, that seems sensible. Yeah.
Why doesn't that sound like the majority of people decide what the majority of people want, and then the majority of people get? Well, we've not had that, and certainly not had that for a
and we have a wide range of people that would be voted in.
You don't want to jump from one group of a dictatorship, which I think, certainly as you see people turning and saying, we're going to change this because we don't agree with this law, we're going to bring in a new law that's going to make this law now. Like the whole thing about Rwanda for me is ridiculous.
It's insane.
But they bring in to spend a load of time. So spend a load of time debating this and to try and change the law, to try and change the view and the law to make it law, so that nobody can do anything about it. But I think I'm not sure I think there should be dissenters on both sides. Maybe we turn up and say, well, actually, I'm not agreeing with this, and don't get punished for it just because you don't have that view of someone who has...
If you're in that party who wants to do it.
You should be able to say, are you actually doing the right thing here for people?
Well, they're deliberately, even like civil servants, aren't they? They're deliberately, MPs now are stopping people telling them the truth. That seems to be reported over and over again, that people will advise them and say, that's a terrible idea, or that's also illegal, or that, and they'll just go, no, we want to push this through, but it'll make these 5 people over here who are racist vote for us. A lot of it is they're just trying to get votes. I mean, I would admire you, Brian, if you did want to become an MP. The thing that would put me off would be having to be around MPs. I don't know if I could stand it.
It depends what you're trying to do, you're doing, what kind of thing. I mean, it's for me, in a way, it's no different from being around football players. I use them as part of my entertainment. right? All of them different things or different interests. I just wanted my idea of life, and it's still the same, Joe, is I wanted to laugh at something every day, whether it's something I'd seen or read or researched or been involved in or thought about. And that's how I thought that that's what I think life's supposed to be about. You know, you're supposed to enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
And I would see like with the rest of the MPs, it's the same kind of thing for me. Maybe that one of the things is maybe that most MPs should be about our age, you know, who have actually lived a certain amount of, had loads of experiences and are able to stand up and go, listen, I was bullied when I was a kid or whatever else it was. But I'm not getting bullied now. I'm going to say and do whatever I think is the right thing. Because at the end of it, you want to be able to say, well, you did the very best you could. You're not right or wrong all the time, but just do the best you can.
But I think you're right. They've completely forgotten that they are working for us and they are meant to be making our lives better. But they're very much just glorifying themselves and putting money in their own pockets, and they're completely forgotten you're working for us to supposedly run the country well.
But in Scottish terms, Joe, the governing party having a £100,000 camper van parked on a drive is better. We just don't realise what exactly it means. We're all going to get a shot of it.
We've all got a share in a camper van.
It, you know?
Yeah, that was so funny. It was also the sort of smallness of whatever, if it's corruption or whatever it is, you're like, oh my God, that's so Scottish. Camper van outside your mum's house.
I was very amused about the fact that they're looking for the police are looking for some antique cutlery.
Oh.
That's part of the same. The clues are on the look, they've been looking for some antique cutlery.
That was, it was all so crazy. And also, you know, whatever you thought of Nicola Sturgeon, you know, she was a successful politician. And it was funny because I said it was a bit like Alex Ferguson at Man United. Like SNP were really strong until she stood down, and then you realised it was held together with her sheer force of personality. That's the whole thing that was keeping it, and probably her entire energy was keeping them together. And then they all started arguing with each other because wanting independence, lots of different people with different political views want independence. They're all quite different to each other, I think.
Of course. Just when I was just talking about things there, what were you talking about the government of Scotland having spent time? And I deliberately didn't watch any of the news during COVID and things most of the time, but I missed that the medical expert woman who lived in Edinburgh who used to broadcast from her
cupboard. The blonde lady.
Who used to broadcast from her cupboard.
Yes.
I miss her.
I trusted her.
She's still doing it. Is she doing
still in that cupboard,
now?
Yeah. Did she get out?
Because she was great.
Yeah, she used to have fresh flowers. It was a nice cupboard. She'd done it up nicely. Yeah, but it was just a cupboard. Yeah.
McClare's on mark. Life with Brian.
It's that time again when we test the grey matter and better judgment of our guests in the now firmly established Life with Brian quiz. It seems logical this time to combine Brian's football background with Joe's world of comedy. So we're calling this one, and I've blatantly nicked a phrase from Jimmy Greaves, It's a Funny Old Name. And here are the rules. It's a penalty shootout, with you both taking 5 alternate goes at it. All you have to do is spot the imposters from this list of footballers with rude names. And sincere apologies in advance, Joe, for the juvenile behaviour that is to come. It's hardly befitting someone of your comedic talents. So if you think these people are real players, please say zinger. But if you think they are fictitious, then please say ringer. Okay, have you both got the idea?
Yeah.
Okay, Joe, you're the guest. So you get the honour of going first. And you're going to be kicking off with Rod Fanny.
Rod Fanny. I've never heard of him, so I'm going to say ringer.
Oh, unfortunately, you've missed your first penalty. Monsieur Fanny was a defender, most notably for Rennes and Marseille in France, who he won 5 caps for around 15 years ago. Good in the box, apparently.
Shocky, your opening spot kick is Fabian Arsman.
Ringer.
No, believe it or not, Zinger, it's true.
Great name.
Fabian was a goalie who made around 200 appearances for various clubs in the Argentine top division.
All right, 0-0 then.
You're looking for that goalkeeper shirt.
Spell that. Not Fabian, in other words.
Arsman. Arsman.
Arsman.
It's not
yeah.
arse. You said arse, not ass.
Arsman.
It's my
He's
plummy,
very posh, isn't he?
plummy.
Yeah.
That's right, accent you've got.
Okay, so it's 0-0. Joe, we're going to move on to your second one, which is Reinhard Wankspanner.
See, Germans have such mad long names, don't they? I really want that to be true. So I'm going to say, even though it's insane, I'm going to say Zinger.
Oh, Joe, I'm sorry. I've given you the eyes. Sadly, Reinhard doesn't exist. Although if he did, he'd probably be very handy.
Okay, so still 0-0 after, 3 penalties? So, Brian, your second attempt to take the lead is Ralph Minge.
Oh.
Ringer.
No, Zinger.
I think I remember that. Remember him.
Well, I might have sold you a dummy here because reading this, that Ralph Minge, actually pronounced Ralph Minger, was a prolific striker for the successful Dynamo Dresden side of the 1980s.
Oh, so you're just making it up then? Pronounce these names.
Just a different.
That's how it's spelled. That's how it's spelled.
That's how it's
Brian.
spelled. I might be pronouncing it wrong. I mean, there's a chance you could have played against Mr. Ringer if things had transpired.
Mr. Minger, not Mr.
Minger,
Ringer.
not Mr. Ringer. You might have played against him as well, but either way, it's still 0-0.
Yeah, it is. Okay, this is very, very.
I'm going to watch your eyes this time, Mark.
Yes. Okay. Well, this time, okay, your third one, Joe, is Jizz Hornkamp.
Oh God.
You've not apologised enough for this quiz.
Yes. It's so ridiculous. See, I'm going to say it can't be true, but I'm going to say Zinger.
Yay! We've got one finally. That's right. Dutch striker Jizz shoots at any given opportunity in the Eredivisie, where he is currently plying his trade with Heracles Almelo. So 1-0, you've taken the lead.
How do you spell his jizz?
As you would expect to spell his jizz.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Brian, back to you. And this time you've got Mike Hunt.
Ringer.
Yes, you quickly level things up 1-0.
Oh.
Sadly, not a footballer, but a former American footballer for the Green Bay Packers and the hero of a million prank phone calls, most notably in the movie Porky's.
All right, 1-1, we're level. So, Joe, we've reached your penultimate penalty, and this one is Michael Gash.
It's not as fun as the jizz or the wank spanner, is it? So I'm going to say Ringer.
Oh, missed again, unfortunately.
Oh.
Yeah, Michael Gash is a real one. Opposition fans may call him a fanny, but Michael has played up front for a number of lower division sides and is currently player manager at Vanarama Northside Peterborough Sports.
Okay, penalty number 4 for you, Chocky, and I think we're still 1-1, aren't we?
It's still 1-1, yeah.
Yep.
And your penultimate one, Chocky, is Andre Muff. Before you start complaining, Muff, spelled exactly how you'd imagine it to be spelled.
I'm complaining. Zinger.
Oh, yeah. He's a striker for several Swiss clubs and was apparently well known for being a bit of a diver.
All right, then. So Brian's taking a... Brian's taking
like that, Brian.
For you.
All right. You've got unassailable lead, Brian, but Joe, you can put the pressure on him here with your final penalty. So this is Arse Bandit.
Ringer.
It is a ringer. Well done. That makes it 2-2. Arse Bandit is a bit of an internet urban myth, which if you choose to believe, means he is an Algerian goalie from the 1970s. But sadly, evidence to prove his existence is pretty thin on the ground. Bit of a shame, that.
Okay, Brian, you can finish us off here, madam. And this one will win the game, won't it, if you get this right? And your final one is Dick Splash.
Ringer.
You saying ringer? Stepping
Ringer.
up confidently and saying ringer.
I'm not just ringer. I just want to get it over with.
Yeah.
Ringer.
You put it confidently in the top corner. Yeah, it's false. Just another figment of Mark's juvenile imagination, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can take no credit for any of those. Mark was up to
some teammate you are.
I was going to say Mark was up till about 4 o'clock in the morning.
For help, eh?
I'm going to add this to my list of ridiculous things that men will talk about.
McClare's mailbag. McClare's mailbag. McClare's mailbag.
It's time again for the mailbag, Matthew. Who's been in touch?
Okay, we've got on here from Greyfriars Jobby, who could easily have been in our last game, actually. Asked you, Joe, residing in Edinburgh, if we had to push you for a preference, the Jambos or Hybees, who would it be? I know we touched on this earlier, but you can upset another half of Edinburgh to go along with Brighton and Bolton and Dennis Irwin if you want.
Well, I can hear Hibs from my garden, and when they sing, which they don't always sing "Sunshine on Leith," but if they do, oh my God, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I have to be here.
I think you're taking home ground there. You can't say otherwise living in Leith, can you? So
she's thinking of the state of her windows on the next match day. So very wise.
Kevin Jones, Joe, it's often said that footballers reach their peak around the ages of 27 to 30. Is there an age when you think comedians hit a similar golden period in their careers?
Well, obviously, I've got to go my age. I can't go, it was 20 years ago and I'll never get it back. I think as long as you keep changing in comedy, there should be no reason why you can't keep going on. But as long as you're talking about what things are like with you now rather than, pretending that you're young.
I suppose it's a bit like what Brian said about being a politician, really. You become more relevant. Well, not relevant, but your life experience becomes more useful in older age.
Yeah, and you've also, it's that weird thing, but you've also got to be interested in young people and change, because you don't want to also be just somebody going, oh, young people today, although I do a bit of that, but just keeping up with everything, I think.
Okay. So we've got a double header from our old pal Cumbrian Dave, who's always on the show. And the first one for you, Joe, is...
Who would be your headline male and female comics, and why?
I think I would say Sarah Millican for just sheer joke. Like, I went to see her show, and as a comedian, to be honest, I was like, I don't know if I'll be able to manage a 2-hour show. And it went like that, and I laughed and laughed and laughed. And then she will finish one tour and be writing the next one as she's doing it. Like, she's so prolific and really, really funny. So I would have her. And then, I do like a lot of different comics. So I do tend to prefer comics like Rod Gilbert, comics that more are telling a story, telling you about their lives rather than one-liners. Like, I like, if you've spent 2 hours with someone, by the end of it, I like to know them a bit more. Tommy Tiernan is another one. Fantastic. I would say Tommy Tiernan, he's like a magical thing. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's a good double act. And Dave, he's got a question for you, Brian. Here he is.
Who was the funniest person in any dressing room that you were in?
Deliberately being funny and attempting to be funny were Tommy Burns and Gordon Strachan. Gordon's just, you wouldn't want to take Gordon on in a competition of wit, because he just had that. And both of them have got or had ginger hair, so I don't know if that was a genetic part of being funny, but both of them were very quick-witted. But other ones were just funny because they didn't realise what they were saying or what they were doing. So most of them most of the rest of them are like that. Yeah,
including yourself, I imagine. Sometimes.
I'm not so sure. Well, but they weren't laughing at me because it's like one of my proudest things was that Ryan Giggs said that he didn't understand my sense of humour when we were teammates, and then this is what he said when we were teammates, and he said and. Finney followed it up by saying, and I still don't understand his sense of humour now. So, for me, that stood the test of a time that he just doesn't get it. I think it wasn't for anybody else. Yeah. It wasn't for him. It was just for me. It wasn't for him. It wasn't trying. I wasn't trying to entertain. The audience was me. And so there wasn't. I wasn't bothered.
That's good to know when you finally do tread the boards after you've stood as an MP for 4 years and then you become a comedian. You don't have to worry about selling tickets.
Well, but that's why I like that. I mean, I like the thing about a few things that Joe's mentioned. One, you're not going to please everyone, but if there's one person that laughs at it, then that must be worth the effort. And the other part of it is I love and I do like those people who. I've not really got contempt for the audience, but the audience are there for them. They're there for them, not the other way around. You're talking about Jack D, and people who just don't really like the audience. And part of that thing is the detachment's part of the humour and say, well, you paid to come and see me. It's your fault, not my fault.
Yes. I like that attitude. Yeah. What's wrong with you?
Don't you? Why are you expecting to be entertained? I didn't say I was going to entertain you,
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, that seems like a good place to call time on this episode. Joe, thanks so much for coming onto the show. Please tell us about what people can expect from the Here Comes Trouble tour and, of course, where to get tickets and so on.
Yeah, I'm touring April, May in England, and then I've got Scottish dates in June. And it's just, I think the best way, because there's nothing more tedious than a comedian describing their own show, I think, because it just sounds unfunny. But someone they said that I say the things that people think. So I think that is it. Like I'll say, because I don't edit myself on, I'll just go, why not say that? So I call people out on stuff. So it's sort of cathartic for some people, I feel. So, yeah, so it's funny. It's a funny show.
I'm glad I didn't. I was going to ask you earlier on to tell us about your new show. I'm glad I didn't now because the answer would have been very short.
Well, I know it's a sort of question that I do go, sometimes to stop myself from getting annoyed because I'll just want to go, look, it's funny. I'm a comedian. It'll be funny. And it might be your sort of humor. It might not, but I'm not going to describe it is just like killing the frog, But I know people have said, she says what we're all thinking.
Great.
Okay.
That's good enough for us.
So tickets available from joecaulfield.com and
that's where to look to see
funny.
where I am. Yes. And buy my book, The Funny Thing About Death, all of the profits go to Macmillan Cancer Support.
Oh, well, we got a nice comment from Jim Burke, who's a comedian who was totally recommending your book there. He said it was funny and heartbreaking in equal measure. So there you go. There's a recommendation for everybody on the podcast. Jim. Okay, Brian and Matthew, thank you very much as ever.
Pleasure. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Joe. Brilliant. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for the quiz, Mark.
Such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm absolutely thrilled. Joe. The only thing I've done that my husband is excited about, I have to say, is fitting Brian.
What a compliment. We'll have to put that on our mugs from now on.
Yeah.
An Aberdonian getting excited.
Yeah. Well, it was a brief glimmer,
You know that about, because you've got that, I mentioned it before, Joe, about when Alex Ferguson's famous quote about the Aberdeen supporters when he was a manager there.
No, and
he asked them about the atmosphere and what why they must get a bit despondent at times where they're not so whatever the word it is, demonstrative that they are in Glasgow and even in Edinburgh. He says, no. He says, I really like that when the Aberdonians get excited when they're rustling their sweetie papers in their pockets.
Yeah. It is that. I always say that the thing people go, about the Scottish, and I said, yeah, but there are two types. There's your West Coast, your, Billy Connolly and Ali McCoist, and then there's Northeast, that sort of much more dour, serious. And I say, and that's what I've married, more the, we've won the lottery, and they'll be like, well, that'll be a lot of effort spending all that money, won't it?
Okay.
It's a joy.
Yeah. Life with Brian is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network. So remember to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts from and leave us a nice review on Apple and the rest, please. It all helps. Follow us on X and Instagram at Brian McClare Pod and join us again soon for more of this nonsense. Take care.
Life with Brian. Life with Brian. Talking films or music. Life with Brian. Talking TV and food. Life with Brian. Talking trivia and exercise. Life with Brian. It's different every episode. Life with Brian. Talking politics and football. Life with Brian. It's different every episode. Life with Brian. Life with Brian.